Bristol has been a home and breeding ground for graffiti for around 50 years. With the rise in popularity in the 80s, with artists such as 3D from Massive Attack paving the way for creativity in the city, there came trouble. Graffiti ranged from pieces of art to tagging and vandalism, which did not go unnoticed by the police. In 1989, the first nationwide police crackdown on graffiti, nicknamed Operation Anderson, took place, with 72 young artists being arrested, many found in Bristol, receiving hefty fines and the police confiscating any evidence they could find. The BBC made a documentary about this in 1991 called Drawing the Line, where they interviewed some of the suspects and visited Barton Hill Youth Club, which was a place where many of these young artists went to paint and hang out. Now, 36 years on, I investigated how those involved in the initial crackdown have been affected, as well as Bristol as a whole. Welcome to Redrawing the Line. I started my journey by speaking to graffiti artists who were involved in the original operation and talking to them about how it's affected Bristol, as well as their thoughts on the police crackdown comparing then and now.
My name is Tom Bingle, Inky, aka Inky. I'm a graffiti artist from Bristol in the UK. I've been painting since 1984 as part of the first wave of the Bristol graffiti scene.
My name's Steve Goff, aka Choro, Bristol graffiti artist.
My name's Jody. I am a multidiscipline artist, mostly street art.
My name's Chio. I was full-time graffiti artist and vandal, but now I'm too old and I'm more of an illustrator.
What do you think about Operation Anderson back in the 90s or 80s? Were you involved? What happened?
Yeah, it was a whole bunch of us, but we weren't really, I wouldn't say we were involved, we were caught.
I got caught up in my house getting raided and all my stuff, pictures and photos and that taken by the police.
Well, I was arrested. I was arrested quite late in the day, so I had already heard whispers. This was before mobiles or anything, so somebody said somebody got arrested, and I thought, shit, I better get home.
I was one of the only artists that didn't get arrested. I was one of the younger people when it sort of hit. I think it was 1989.
Somebody had a diary with my name and telephone number in it, who I knew, and the police caught him tagging, I think, on Lawrence Hill, and raided his house and found the diary. So that's how they found out who everybody was.
Not through police work, I might add. It was more by chance. They found everyone's numbers.
By the time I got home, went upstairs, knocked on the door, and then they were there and took pretty much everything, all my photo albums, sketches.
So yeah, it was quite a shock really when I went home and my bedroom was stripped of everything and they'd taken everything. My mum and dad weren't too pleased.
Obviously we all got arrested. It did affect us all at the time, and it killed the scene a bit in Bristol at the time.
And it kind of put a stop to graffiti for a while.
I had a fine in community service along with a couple of my mates. My dad paid the fine and I think I paid him back like £5 a week. It was £800 and that was back in the 80s, and I was only 16 on YTS, so it's quite a lot of money.
Bristol City Council have probably got a difficult where there's criminal damage going on, but also there's the artistic side of things, which is it's a difficult sort of balance really.
After hearing from these artists, I spoke to John Nation, who was a youth worker at Barton Hill Youth Club back in the 80s and a mentor for those involved in graffiti. John provided these artists with a place to paint legally, which unfortunately led to him being the figurehead for Operation Anderson. This is his story.
My name's John Nation. Currently I'm employed as a street art tour guide. Before doing this, 14 years ago, I started being a tour guide, but before that I'm mainly known in Bristol for being a youth worker at Barton Hill in the 1980s to around 1992, 93. But more than that, I've also been known as being someone who's been a documenter of graph culture in the early 80s, mainly documenting the history and journey of Bristol, UK. No question that Bristol, its history, its legacy, its journey as being a pivotal city for graffiti culture in the UK cannot be diminished. Since the 80s, through to the 90s, and I'll include mentioning the B word and his arrival. through to the 2000s and through to the current generation. You only have to look around this city.
Do you have any thoughts about Operation Anderson? Were you involved in any way?
Okay, Operation Anderson probably was the most pivotal part of raising consciousness of graffiti culture in Bristol at that time, but also outside of the city. In a nutshell, what Operation Anderson was a joint British Transport Police and Avon Somerset Constabulary investigation into illegal graff in Bristol, but predominantly focused on Barton Hill. Hardcore element of writers who used Barton Hill as seen by the police as a staging post for illegal activity outside of the city. But also came into the equation that my role in the police have seen me as a kind of like Pied Piper who would play a tune and everyone would dance to my tune. It was absolute crap. But also they felt that myself had information in terms of identification of artists and that I would maybe assist them with their investigation. So they issued a search warrant for my home in Barton Hill, the youth centre, stating they were looking for materials related to graffiti. Well, it's a wide search warrant. It could be anything. So they arrested me, took me to the police station, seized many of my personal artefacts, my photo collection, books, VHS video, you name it, comprehensive. And the main reason they arrested me was that they said I was at the centre of a conspiracy to incite individuals to commit criminal damage, that I was directing and dictating and orchestrating young artists or young writers to go to various locations to paint graff illegally. So eventually I was charged with conspiracy to incite individuals to commit criminal damage, which in that period was a charge that could only be tried at Crown Court. Neil Ford, who was the prosecuting barrister for the police, stood up and said, after much deliberation, much soul searching and much examination of, so say, the evidence, the public prosecutions department decided that there was no charge to answer and that I should be acquitted of the conspiracy charge. So I was found not guilty. The media, both locally and nationally, who'd been following my case, had an absolute field day in covering Anderson, the arrests and persecution and vilification of British Transport Police, but also I used that acquittal as an opportunity to talk about my job, graffiti culture in the city and wider field, legal versus illegal, where do you draw the line, acceptability, responsibility, etc.
After hearing from those directly involved and personally affected by Operation Anderson, I tried to contact the police and Bristol City Council for an updated statement about graffiti, but I did not get a response. Luckily, I found a statement put out by the council in 2018 online, which read, "All graffiti is criminal damage unless the owner of the property has given permission. If the building is listed, they are committing a criminal offence under S59 Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990. Where a public mural/street art is planned and permission from the owner is granted, the council will encourage a local consultation to be held to minimise any issues or challenges that may arise. BCC, BWC, police and other partners need to ensure that this message is articulated correctly. Bristol is seen as permissive to graffiti and tagging, and this perception needs to change." This statement shows that the police and council are still waging a war on graffiti in Bristol, and want it to be known that it's an act of vandalism and illegal, and you will be punished for it, and even want you to inform them of what you are painting, even if you have direct permission from the owner of the building. Their views have not changed since the original operation, despite the money and tourism that graffiti brings into the city. Thank you for watching.